Feather in the Wind, which is set in my Maidens of Zombie Kingdom world. And Princess Darn never expected to be a warrior trying to save her kingdom from a new undead threat, but it is up to her and her new friends to save everyone. If you like what you read, check out Maidens of Zombie Kingdom, Young Adult Fantasy Trilogy. She thought things would be better in the light, but dawn brought no relief from the dark magic that chased her. Through the night. Through the long night. Let's get serious here. There are a lot of good places to find writing prompts on the internet. I don't know how you can come up with so many titles and ideas on your own, but I guess it comes with time. It's some of it. It's a lot of places, and again, I write them down. I don't typically store story ideas in the sense of like, oh, here's the premise that I think I got, and I'm going to write out all the details and then use it later. But I will, when I hear a phrase or a combination of words or an idea pokes into my head and kind of hangs there, I'll come up with the title and just kind of write it on the dry erase board and just keep it up there. And sometimes I have a story that's attached to it, so it's something that just kind of brews in my mind for a little while. Or sometimes it's just a phrase that I really liked in a book or a play or a poem or the Bible or, you know, just any kind of group of things, or just a unusual combination of words that I heard somewhere. And sometimes I don't have a story for it. I just put it up there, and then I'll come up with a story idea that kind of bubbles up to the surface, and then sometimes I'll look to the board and see if I can find a title that goes with it. Sometimes it's a really good fit, and sometimes it's just an interesting set of words that kind of goes with it. I do think good titles are an underutilized resource by writers, because, of course, it's the first thing that a reader's going to see when they see your story. So if they're hooked in by the title, then you got it to your advantage. If you're using a very drab title, then a lot of times you're kind of leaving resources on the table, and something that could be quite memorable to the reader is just kind of left behind there. So I've put a lot more work into titles than I used to in the past. I used to just do like one word titles, and that was kind of my thing, but then they were very unmemorable. Like even I couldn't remember what the title of the story was, so I know the readers had trouble too. Armand says, I find if I get an idea while driving or inconvenient times, if it's a really solid idea, I will remember it later. I don't trust my memory as much as I used to, but I think you and I are on the same page on that a little bit, in the sense of like, I'm not afraid of losing the idea, but because of titles kind of coming and going, I'll save potential titles as we go. Rich says he has to keep a notepad in his car, and that's pretty common. Armand just isn't. He doesn't do that. I think he used to when he was earlier in his writing career, but doesn't do it anymore. I don't drive, problem solve. Never leave the house. Just sit around waiting for titles to come to you. Spring says, yeah, I always get the best ideas in the shower and when I'm trying to fall asleep. Very inconvenient. And there you go. I tell myself that and I remember the idea. Spoiler alert, I usually don't remember, yeah. And Armand's point is that if it's actually a good story idea, it'll stick with him. But I lean a little more toward you guys in the sense of like jotting down a note or something. That's probably what some of the titles are for me. It's just it's like the kernel of a story idea, and so I'm just kind of putting it up there as sort of a placeholder for later and that kind of thing. And then sometimes it turns into something completely different. What I originally thought it was going to be wasn't going to be. But yeah, I'm constantly storing those. So even when I'm reading, I'll just hit a random phrase in a book that I'm reading by Stephen King or Brian Keene or Armand Rosamalia or whoever, and I'll pull that idea out and put it up somewhere. So in a sense, I guess I am taking notes on story premise ideas. It's just that I'm always using the title as the placeholder, the potential title, and occasionally I'll change them. You know, there'll be something better that can kind of evolve out of that comes up later. Yeah, but sometimes I feel like my stories don't live up to the title. I'll come up with a really great title, and then the story's kind of mediocre. So I'm constantly trying to edit the story up to the quality of the title. So that is one side effect of saving catchy phrases on the board all the time. All right, but chased her through the long night. There was no village ahead. The maps had lied to her. Or the plague of the... What do we call the zombies in here? The ghouls. The plague of the ghouls that had shattered the kingdom and much of the world, much of the larger world, had taken this place as well. All right. I might cut this to a new paragraph there. I think that will be better. Let me pull this one back up. Sometimes paragraph breaks are a little arbitrary, but sometimes it's just the idea, sometimes it just serves the story, sometimes it's pacing and just not having long paragraphs or varying the lengths of the paragraphs. All right, there was... oh, editing while you write. Yeah, I'm falling into my own trap. All right, this place as well. There was no sign of a larger village, though, unless it had been generations ago. Trees had grown back thick and old along the roadway. Foundations, wells, and fences were utterly lost, had they ever been there before. We'll make this a new paragraph now. Only one shelter remained. It was too large for a single family shack and too small for a village gathering house. Maybe a store, but probably not. Maybe a shrine, but if it was, the god went unworshipped now. The roof sagged. The logs of the walls gapped. Place was dark and empty. Even the spiders had vacated their ancient webs long ago. Heather accepted the place as shelter, though. collapsing to her side on the sour dirt floor. She had no other plan beyond that fall. Darkness would come again, and this would be no protection from whatever evil had her sent. Okay, a splitting table had been pushed into one dark corner. Broken crockery decorated the edges of the wall. Someone had carved runes in a language unknown to her. And this bothered her a great deal. Okay. Voices carried on the wind. Heather had no energy left to fight, but she still crawled up to her knees and drew her sword to greet whoever it might be. Children's laughter. Children's laughter drifted through the door, through the remains of the door that would no longer close tight. That should have been comforting in the mortal world. Armies and bandits did not travel with children. If they ever did, they certainly were never laughing. But Heather had seen all sorts of unnatural business since becoming a knight. And dark spirits were deceptive, manipulative, and full of guile. So she trusted that high, shrill laughter not one bit. All right. So far, so good. I think we got a good start to a story here. Now let's get some action going. The building shifted and rattled. It could have been the wind or any blowing. those suspicious runes pulsed and lit up with a dull light. She braced herself for the place to collapse in on top of her. She braced herself for the place to collapse in on top of her before she could gain her feet and exit. She was surprised to see the room swelling from the inside instead of falling. The cobwebs faded as the corners of the room sharpened back into clean lines. The roof lost its sag, and a few support beams grew into the missing slots. The table. All right, let me put this in a new. No, this is the same paragraph. This is the same stuff going on. The table walked. No, I'm going to make a new paragraph. Sorry. The table walked out toward her. Heather stood and held her sword at the ready to slay this table monster if she could. The furniture seemed to take the warning. And bypassed her to get back into place. The broken crockery. I'm going to make this a new paragraph too. I probably could have made that all the same, but that's alright. The broken crockery was gone from a now swept and fresh floor. In its place, cooking smells that tempted her empty stomach wafted through the space through the new space. She trusted those smells less than the children's laughter. Sampling magic stew was a good way to be poisoned by a witch based on the stories Heather knew from childhood. Transparent figures moved about the room, and then exited through the repaired door, leaving Heather alone with the cooking. She staggered toward the door. Armand redeemed, have you tell a fun fact. Alright, hold on just a moment. She staggered toward the door and forced it open with her forearm. She had no intention of being trapped in this magic place as it transported her somewhere else. As she emerged from, let me make this a new paragraph too. As she emerged from the strange cabin, she found the village the maps had promised. Alright. Alright, since we're looking, okay, Armand is redeemed, tell a fun fact. So, since we're looking at the children's books, this series, the three books in the Maidens of Zombie Kingdom trilogy, I had written before the pandemic and had planned to put them out probably a year later. So I was finishing them up, I was going to get them edited, and then they were going to be put down the line. My sales started to go up about that time, and then leading into the pandemic, I had some of the highest sales months of my career. And so a bunch of books got published all at once right there in 2020. And because my Lake Scatterwood books for like younger readers, like middle grades and younger, were doing well, we went ahead and pushed up putting this series out at the same time. So I ended up with like 10 book releases in a matter of months, and part of it was they all came out at once. Like we put out all three books of Maidens of Zombie Kingdom all at once. We put out 3 books of Lake Scatterwood all at once, and then eventually a series called Time Travel Academy that I'm having to rename. So I've taken those down and I'm going to re-release those at some point in the future. So all these series started like popping up at once, and so I went from like having no young reader books out to all these books out at the same time. And they did pretty well at that time period. I think I did flood the market a little, but people were buying, so they were out there. The Lake Scatterwood books I wrote for the older of my 2 sons, and at the time he was struggling with reading, and he was a little older but had trouble reading. And so we were having trouble finding books that were on his reading level but were also interesting for him. So he had gone off to camp, and we were allowed to email him. And I emailed him a chapter of Lake Scatterwood, which was just a story I made up. The first one was just about aliens invading the camp. So we got a new chapter every day and was really excited to read the end of the book when we picked him up. The whole time I'm sending these, I didn't know if he was even reading them or if he liked them or any of that. But when he got in the car, the first thing he wanted was the end of the story. And so I had kind of been working on those and then started looking at publishing them, and had they were kind of shorter, so I put 2 stories in each book, and started putting those out, and those have done pretty well for me over the whole course. So that's kind of how I became indirectly became a young reader author as we went along. So that's where some of these were born from. This one I'd worked on for a while and had put it aside. The first book in that trilogy, the idea of having zombies come in on a sword and sorcery sort of kingdom, and then have it at young young adult level. And so I'd written some of it and had kind of set it aside, and then came back to it and wrote all 3 books back to back, to have them released at the same time, and also to be able to like fix continuity between all 3 books, so that stuff I put into the second and third book I could introduce in the first book before they were published, and it wasn't like stuff was coming out of nowhere. So those have done pretty well, and being a trilogy is good because it's kind of at an ending point. If it got super popular, I could come up with another trilogy of the 3 books and continue the story. But sort of these short stories have kind of served that purpose. So sort of the pandemic is kind of the reason that I suddenly had 3 young reader series out all at the same time, when I'd actually planned to kind of spread those out more over a longer period of time. But I guess it was a case of striking while the iron was hot there. It's not as hot as it used to be. My sales are down a little bit, especially compared to back then, but I'm doing okay. All right. As she emerged from the strange cabin, she found the village the maps had promised. The trees had retreated. Green grasses replaced the thick bed of leaves that marked seasons upon seasons of old growth forest. And there were all those laughing children running around and between the adults preparing an outdoor meal. Among the decorations for some sort of lively festival. Heather spied the road that corresponded roughly to the one she had followed in here. But she did not trust that it would see her back out to any world she recognized. "Who are you?" she demanded. Good Lord, let's spell some things right here, Jay. "Who are you?" she demanded. "And why? And how am I here?" A few people glanced at her. But returned to their tasks as if her presence and her outburst were nothing all that special. One large man wearing an apron took his time wiping off his hands before he approached. He tapped a woman on the shoulder, and she put down a tray to follow him up the path toward the cabin and Heather. She saw movement to her side and spun as she retreated a few steps. A few steps along the front of the structure. She saw movement to her side and spun as she retreated a few steps along the front of the structure away from the open door. The men glanced at the point of her sword, but then entered the building as if they had better things to do than deal with her. The couple from the festival setup arrived, but stayed outside the range of her blade. He said, "Allow me to introduce myself. I don't care what your names are. How did you bring me here?" The man and woman exchanged a look that seemed heavy with meaning, and she spoke next. "I'm sorry you are frightened. This is necessary for our safety. I demand to be returned to my world. This isn't another world," the man said. "Not exactly. More like a pocket within the world we all share. Then I want out of your pocket," she said. "We will show you the way. The woman said. "But you should know there are dark forces just outside this safe place. We can sense them. They are close. This time of year is always dangerous, but the dark spirits are more active than usual. We cannot risk discovery. You would do well to not risk keeping me around. Are the dead monsters still out there? The boy asked. Hold on. The man turned and waved a hand as if shooing. I don't even know if that's the right word for that. The man turned and waved a hand as if shooing away bugs or some house pet. Not now. Go play. Say, go play, son. Do you speak of the ghouls? Heather asked. The couple, the intruding boy, and even one of the men from the cabin stuck his head out to hear this. The man in the apron, who had not been allowed to introduce himself, said, "You were out there with the dead who no longer slept. That threat is over in my world." Heather said. The woman let out a sigh. The boy raised his hands and cheered. Oh man, my OBS is doing weird things. Can you guys still hear me? That is the second time that has happened in 2 days, where it gave me a disconnection notice and then seemed to pop back in. If you guys can still hear me, please let me know. Yeah, both yesterday, it didn't mess. Okay, thank you, Armand. It didn't mess up the recording, and it seemed to not completely kick me out of the stream, but it split the video on Twitch into two when it did that. I don't know what's causing it. I don't know why my OBS is doing that. It may have something to do with an update I need to fix or something. I don't know. I'm glad you're still here if you're still here. So hopefully that won't happen again today. I would say hopefully it wouldn't happen ever, but I don't want to overreach in my wishes. All right. So if you're still with me, I appreciate it, and we'll continue on with the story. The woman let out a sigh. The boy raised his hands and cheered. It was the man who held up his halting hands. Everyone calmed down. How Do you know for sure that threat is over? She sized up the man. She didn't trust. Alright. She sized up the man. She didn't trust his reaction to the other's celebration. I'm a knight in the Order of Royal Daughters. I serve the one true king of Valahark. I was part of the army that defeated the evil magic behind the ghouls. They are gone. But something else I could not see chased me here through the woods all night. Now I'm lost in this place and need to go back, to return to my people, we'll say. Silence followed. The woman finally broke it. The haunts of the woods are always there. But this is the festival to renew the wards around our village and protect us from them. We sometimes use seers to view the world outside the pocket. We saw the ones you call ghouls. We saw many fall to them. Alright. We saw the ones you call ghouls. We saw many fall to them. The world is dangerous, and that's why we must protect ourselves. The world is dangerous indeed, Heather said. And that's why I must return to protect everyone outside of here. More people seemed to be gathering, and Heather was starting to feel trapped. The woman said, "You should eat and rest. even if you plan to return to the haunts, to the realm of the haunts. You'll be no match for them in your current condition. The man said, "You're no match for them anyway." The man said, "You're no match for them anyway." And they will have you if you leave. There is no if. There is no if about this. All right, let me put that in italics real quick. There is no if about this. Time moves differently here. And it will be dark over there soon. You should wait. If you keep me here, Heather said, you'll regret it. I'll be the threat. Let's say I'll become the threat you are trying to hide from. We do not take well to threats. Girl Knight. He said, I think hiding has made you soft. I think you avoid conflict, and you are not prepared to face me at my worst. The growing crowd exchanged looks that were easier to read as common fear. The growing crowd exchanged looks that were easier to read as common fear. A number of them backed away. We cannot expose ourselves to threats, the man said. It is not our fault you stumbled into our pocket. You were seeking safety. Your soul cried out to us. We did not bring you here. Heather lowered her sword a bit did not put it away. Can you send me back? I will tell no one of you. You probably won't survive another night over there to tell anyone, he said. But we have no fear of your story, because you will not remember us once you are gone. The woman held up her hands. Please, just stay. Renew your energy, and you can move again in the light. You can face the dangers at full strength. I don't want to be here. I don't trust any of you. Release me. The man lifted his fist, and Heather responded by pointing her sword at him. He sneered and said, "You are the greatest danger to yourself." He snapped his fingers, and then she was gone. Heather gasped and scrambled to her feet from where she had leaned, and apparently slept outside the ruined cabin. She remembered the place changing shape, the voices, and the runes. She did not recall how she got out here. I'll say she turned in a full circle. Something told her she wasn't alone, but there was no one in sight. No one she could see, anyway. Alright. But there was no one in sight, no one she could see, anyway. The sun... Okay, let me make this a new paragraph. We're almost done here. The sun was already setting. How was that possible? didn't feel the least bit rested. Howls and unnatural rumblings rose from the direction of the dark forest before the light was even gone. Heather made her way to the road again. She afforded one glance down the deserted path from which she had come, and then turned away to flee once more before she took to heel. She felt something in her pockets. I'm going to make this last part a new paragraph, a final paragraph. Before she took to heels, she felt something in her pockets. Fresh food. Berries. Bread that was still warm. Vegetables and meat with steam rising off of them. Wrapped in leaves. And stuffed into her pockets with all this mysterious food were the petals. No, I never spelled petals right. I think that's the way you spell petals when it's a flower. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong there. And stuffed into her pockets with all this mysterious food were the petals of multi-colored flowers. This was not the season for blooming, but the presence of magic food. Hold on. Magic food bothered her more. It all smelled good. It was tempting. And her stomach growled its emptiness. Still, she cast all that food and the petals onto the path behind her. She was nobody's fool. Heather got her weary feet moving as another night approached.